Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, How to Repurpose Your Event Content Like a Pro. My name is Carissa Bartelt. I'm on the product and industry marketing team here at Cvent, and I'm so excited to be here with you guys today. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items to get off the top here. On the right side of your screen, you can join the chat. We'll be kind of participating and reacting throughout the presentation with some of your kind of insights there. You can also submit questions in the Q&A and download the slide deck over there on the resources to the right. So now that all that's out of the way, I'm going to bring on our speakers for today.
Thanks, Carissa. I can start and introduce myself. Hi, everyone. My name's Victoria Kinshawan. I am a content marketer based out of our London office. I'm responsible for our content strategy in Europe, which includes working with lots of different teams to create and produce content that resonates with our audiences, but it also includes repurposing content and finding ways to do that effectively. So super excited to be here today and chatting with you all.
I'll go next. Just me left. Yeah, obviously, my name's Wade Bowers. I'm part of our product team here at Cvent. Excited to be with you all. And my focus at Cvent is working on video and how our products utilize video. And I'll be talking a lot about that today. And looking forward to being with you all.
Great group here today, so I'm really excited to get started. Let's talk a little bit about what we're going to go over in our presentation today. So today we're going to cover one, really understanding the business case for repurposing your event content. We're going to talk about how to repurpose that content across different channels and platforms and what the methodology is there, how to know if your repurposing strategy is working, common challenges and how to overcome them, and then we're going to save a little bit of time here at the end for some Q&A so we can kind of react and talk with you guys. So before we get started today, I always like to kick things off with a little poll. I just want to know, Victoria, Wade, and I were thinking about what does it look like right now? How is everybody here today currently handling their event content? Do you currently repurpose your content? Yes, no, sometimes. What does that look like today? So we're going to take that. Let's see what we got. All right. Okay. Not too bad. So sometimes is about over half of us are doing this, but not regularly. And then there's about 20% of us right now that aren't doing it at all. So I think the potential is great, right? To kind of create a little bit more process and system here. But then also figure out, how we can make this more possible for everybody on the call today. So going into that, right, why should we care and why should we think about repurposing our event content? What are those benefits of repurposing? What do you think, Victoria?
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing to think about, especially as many of us now are sort of having to think about, bandwidth and the resources that we have at our fingertips. Repurposing is really an important way to make the most of what you have already without reinventing the wheel and spinning up new things. But I think, we've got a list of benefits here. I think one of the biggest things is really when it comes to your events, being able to amplify the message and amplify the content that you've spent so much time creating and being able to get that out there to a wider audience through different mediums and different channels. So those are it's a really important thing to think about, and it can help you save a lot of time in the long run.
I love that, because when you talk about saving time, right? We just finished our kind of big flagship conference in San Antonio about a month ago, and we had 200 sessions. And when you think about how much work goes into creating the content for all of those sessions, if each one is 30 minutes, 45 minutes, how many slides do you make? How many talk tracks do you write? And then what really happens with that afterwards? Because it feels like right now we're in the state of the industry, right? Or state of our jobs where we're trying to figure out how to maximize and do more with less. And when you have some beautiful content that you've already spent all this time producing and workshopping and rehearsing, what happens to it after the event? Right? It doesn't behoove you to kind of let that die and let it only live in that one instance, right? There's so much potential to do something with it afterwards. What do you think, Wade?
Yeah, exactly. You really want to be able to make the most of, like you said, that investment you're putting into creating all that content. And what, I particularly focus on a lot is making it easier. Sometimes one reason you may not be repurposing, you're like, this seems really hard. So I think today, hopefully, we'll be able to talk a little bit about ways to make that easier, that it doesn't have to be daunting, but that by making it easier, you really can leverage that investment and all that work you've put in up front and be able to utilize it, do all these things you see here listed on this slide to really benefit your marketing efforts, extend your reach, get additional audience interested in your events. All those great things can come when you do it. So there's a lot of opportunity here.
Well, and there's some statistics in the marketing world, right? About, hey, it takes at least 7 times for someone to see something and then remember it or take action on it. When you think about that, right? Not repurposing that content or repeating that message, right, doesn't really then sink in with your audience. So when you think about, I want to have that brand consistency, or I really want people to learn or ingest the message that I'm trying to put out there, you need to make sure that you're getting that in front of them multiple different times in multiple different ways. Victoria, how do you feel that repurposing helps drive future attendance at your events?
I think that's a good question in the sense of there are so many ways that you can sort of repackage and chop up some of the most compelling highlights from your event and create highlight reels for social media. We do that a lot with our flagship events, Cvent Connect and Cvent Connect Europe, as a way to just show, give a teaser as to what you might have missed at this year's event. But, don't worry, come back next year. It'll be more of the same. And I think just to add finally to what both of you have said is it's really making sure that your event lives on after its end date. It's not just one moment in time, right? Like repurposing gives it new life and makes sure that the content that you've spent so much time creating, as you mentioned, just lives on further into the future. So
I love that. And content's so important, right? I think when we see, the reasons why people attend events or why people get approval from their organizations to send them to events, right? So much of it is learning and content and what that is. And when you can kind of give people a taste or a preview of the type of content that they would be getting at your event, it helps them get that buy-in and it helps them feel confident that your event that you're hosting is worth their time or their money or their investment, right? And they know the types of learnings that they're going to get out. So I think all of that is pretty huge. And what about then when we talk about redistributing your content, right? Maximizing that time, making sure that you're really getting ROI from all that effort, right? I think there's a lot of different channels that you can think about when you think about where this content goes.
Absolutely. I think it goes back to the fact of events take a lot of time and effort to put together, whether that's a one-day event or a multi-day conference. And it's about thinking, okay, we've got all of this great content that we've been intentional about curating and crafting. So thinking about how can I sort of transform that into these different types of formats. So as an example, we've got here, from one event, you could have perhaps a blog series, or you could put some of the most compelling videos on your YouTube channel if you're trying to grow that platform, or you can chop up some of your sessions into video snippets and distribute them on channels like Instagram or LinkedIn. So it's really thinking about all of the different ways that you can tell the story from your event across other digital platforms. And I think that's that in that way, that you're getting more bang for your buck and more mileage from the content you spent so much time creating. And, for me, I think as a content marketer, and it's really in this role at Cvent that I've been able to see sort of this growing synergy between events and content. So, as we've said, events generate a whole lot of valuable content, but it's also the fact that your content strategy can inform your event programming. So the insights that you get from your audience and understanding the topics and the themes that your audience wants to hear more about, that can feed into the types of sessions that you create at your event, or the speaking points that you talk to. And both channels really are really great for getting those audience insights, because at your event you can get in real time, understand what feedback you're getting from the event, to then perhaps translate into your other content channels. And the same way you can measure, how your content is performing to see, do these topics and themes resonate enough for us to create session content around that. So there's a real powerful link. I kind of see it as a power couple almost, between events and content, and seeing events as just another sort of content distribution channel.
So when we think about, hey, that's a lot of different places that we could put our event content, right? We looked at that wheel and the spoke, and there's 10 different places that this content could potentially live, or it could potentially take on new life. But how do we get started? What would that process look like, Victoria, when you're building out your strategy and kind of conceptualizing? This is daunting and it seems like more work, right? How do I start thinking about this?
It's a good question, and it's something that I've been thinking a lot about, because we've got our conference coming up in November, Cvent Connect Europe, and it's a multi-day conference, and we have a ton of thought leadership sessions. And so when I was thinking about, okay, how do we put together a plan to start thinking about how we're going to reuse that content after the event, the first step was thinking about the different session types that we do have. And so we have, 4 main categories here. We have our general sessions, which are really our keynotes, our CEO keynote, our celebrity keynotes, and also our product roadmaps. And these are really great for promotional clips, things like recap montages, and we also have our stream stage sessions. So these are our sessions that really have that brand level messaging. Those are sessions that are live streamed to our virtual audience as well. And we know that there is going to be high quality footage. So those are great for things like our YouTube channel, or repurposing these topics into blog posts, or webinar topics as well. And then we have our breakout sessions, which are smaller sessions, a lot more of these, and so not all of them are filmed, but that means that we just have to make sure we're prioritizing which sessions we do repurpose. And then finally, we have our virtual programming. So these are our behind the scenes segments. These are 10 to 15 minute segments for our virtual audience, really designed to give them a look behind the scenes at the event. But we can also be intentional about including some interviews there as well, with some of the speakers from the event doing deeper dives. And it's really those interview segments that are great for repurposing after the event as well. And I think prioritization is key, right? Because we can't be everywhere at once. We can't do all the things. So it's really about, shortlisting what are those sessions that you are going to really make sure that we can prioritize. And it's things like thinking, is the topic evergreen? Because that, gives more longevity to your content. Does it fill a content gap? I'm a big fan of making sure that we look at, the feedback from the session as well. And things like, what were the ratings like? What were the Q&A and the comments from the audience? And that can also feed your content after the event as well. And like the logistics is another key thing. So you might be thinking, what's that got to do with content? But logistics is important because you want to make sure that you have the right footage, you have the right video and audio quality. So it's really making sure you're working with your production team or your planning teams to ensure that you know which sessions are going to be filmed, and which sessions will have the highest video and audio quality as well. And then finally, I think it's also a case of thinking about where is your content going to live after your event. So how we do it for Cvent Connect Europe is for the first 30 days of the event, we make sure that all of our content lives on demand in our attendee hub. And that means that those attendees who had registered for the event, who had come to the event, they're able to easily catch up with any sessions they may have missed. It's really about, capturing the most engaged audience at your event. It also means that we can capture any new registrations, people who might have missed the event but still want to catch up with things that they might have missed. We also have, after that, we will host our content on our content hub, which lives on our website, and it's really a home for all of our video content, and we can be really selective about which are the best sessions, which sessions were the most highly rated, adding that to our content hub as well. And YouTube is a really special one because it's really a case of thinking about your wider content strategy. Are there sessions there that have a decent search, value, people searching in YouTube, it being the world's second largest search engine? Are there sessions there that tie into your search and blog strategy, and thinking about, perhaps you can work with your SEO teams or do a little bit of digging into that as well. So that's sort of how we think about where our content will live after the event.
I love that. I mean, these are a lot of different places that you can redistribute, right? The same pieces of content. Wade, why do you think it's important, or what do you think these different channels or places to host this content, right? How does that play within like your customer journey, right? Of consuming this information or consuming the content? What are some of the use cases between all of these, right?
Yeah, well, really the attendee hub, or kind of whatever content or session registration system you're using, provides the opportunity for those that for whatever reason may not have been able to consume the content in full or at all. If they're on site and they had a conflict, a certain meeting or something, they really wanted to watch it, having it available there makes it easy for them to be able to be able to watch that content they really want to participate in. Or if they were late, they missed kind of some key moments out of a keynote, and they really wanted to get a chance to find out what was said. It's right there and it's available for them. I think one key to this particular method is it's really close. It's right there. It's right there in the scheduling system. So it's easy for the attendees to get access while they're still on site or participating virtually, and be able to participate in the whole range of content that you're offering. The other part is that we're looking at Content Hub. What's really nice there is this is a place where the content kind of takes a life of its own, independent a little bit from the event. And there you're able to fully curate. You have full control. YouTube is awesome by its reach, but you're also mixed in with everything. So when you have your own content hub, you're able to fully curate stuff, and it's all your stuff. So you can really help guide that attendee journey through the different elements you would like them to participate in, and kind of figure out what makes the most sense based upon your overall objectives for that content. And then finally, of course, YouTube, Victoria said it well, you reach everybody. You've got a really wide reach, and it's really an opportunity to have that chance to get that content out there and kind of reach out to people you might not get a chance to connect with otherwise. So I think that's kind of how each of those in their individual way participate in that journey.
I like that. I think it's all about discoverability, right? Attendee Hub, when you host those on demand, that's where your audience is already living and breathing, and that's where you said they're accessing their schedule and they can quickly revisit it. Because I think you're right. We all go to events and they're, a long day, and you want to re-ingest something, and I want to be able to find it quickly. And if there's a barrier to me kind of searching for that, I'm likely to lose interest, right? Or quickly kind of deprioritize it from the busy rest of my day. So that's why that's great, right? And Content Hub, being able to kind of curate lists goes really nice with if you're working with other people in your marketing department and you have campaign themes, or you're trying to drive registration for the next year event. You can give that kind of preview of what it was based on audience type or attendee type or the people that you're really trying to grow your audience. And then YouTube is that kind of natural discoverability, right? That's where people are oftentimes stumbling across your information.
Exactly.
I would just add on the YouTube point, it's like not necessarily putting all of your event sessions on there, but really thinking about what are people searching for, what will people be most likely to come across, you know, as they are doing their research on whatever the topic might be, and prioritizing those.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Victoria. I think I almost like look at this like a sideways funnel, if you will. You know, at the very left side, we've got nearly all your content, not all of it. It kind of narrows down as you go to the right, to your point, Victoria, especially like on YouTube. You're probably the smallest group that you use that really hard-hitting, well, or most interesting and captivating content.
And I like this side because I think it just gives sort of a high level view of the different ways that you can take your event content and repurpose it. And it's really thinking about, you know, from one event, you can really generate months worth of content. So really take a look at this. I think you're able to access it after the webinar and think about, you know, is the priority to, you know, grow your organic traffic? If so, then thinking about repurposing your content into blog posts and following those best practices in the sense of, you know, providing an in-depth overview of the topic. So not really recapping the session, but using the session as the foundation to build upon the topic. And what we like to do is, you know, if we do have that session on YouTube, embedding that into the blog post as well. From an SEO standpoint, that's beneficial, but it also means you're hitting those who like, you know, reading written content, and also those who would prefer to watch video. And I think the biggest thing to take from this framework slide is think about the best practices for each platform or medium that you're trying to repurpose into. So things like video snippets, you know, making sure that they're not too long, maybe 60 seconds. For example, on YouTube Shorts, 60 seconds is the limit. And thinking about vertical, because, you know, we're all on mobile phones these days. So can you take that video content and make it into a vertical format? And it's just the same across the board, really thinking about what's the best practice for this format that I'm trying to repurpose my content into. And I thought it'd be good to just walk through an example, because sometimes it can seem quite theoretical. But how do you actually do the repurposing on a tactical level? So this is an example of a session that we had at last year's Cvent Connect Europe. And this was a session that we had on the topic of safeguarding B2B events. And why this was a good session to prioritize for repurposing was we didn't have any content on this topic on our blog post or anywhere else. So it filled a content gap. The other thing is that it was evergreen, so it's not a topic that's going to come out of date anytime soon. It's a consideration that is really important for events in general. And it was also very popular. So we got a lot of good feedback on it, lots of good comments, and people really active in the Q&A. So it was a prime candidate for repurposing. And what we did was put that on our content hub for people to watch on demand. We also put it on our YouTube channel as well. And then we built a blog post around it. And if you take a look at the title of the blog post, you know, we made sure to change the title so that it was more appropriate for search. And that's the other thing to think about when I mentioned, you know, thinking about best practices. It's also thinking about what titles and what format is going to work best for a blog post. And then we embedded the YouTube video into it. And what's really great is we can see the reach that we got from doing that. So being able to amplify the reach of the content, we posted it on social media. So if we take a look at the comments on the post on the next slide, what's really great is that we were able to put that out on our LinkedIn channel, and we got, you know, quite a few comments really thanking, really positive comments, thanking us for writing about the topic. And it's just an example of some of those people might not have been at the event, might not have been able to attend the session, but we were still able to reach them by taking the session and transforming it into a different type of content that we could share through social and through search as well. So it was really, really great example of something that resonated with the audience outside of the event as well.
I want to take a minute and just kind of regroup back on something, right? Because I think when we look at some of the best practices or what we're outlining, right, from why and how to repurpose your content, we're talking about a lot of video. So why is video so key for event content? Why are we repurposing events content in this way and then distributing it in video format, right? I think when we come down to talking about producing and the production of events content in general, it's some of our prettiest content in a very simple way of putting it, right? That's the content that we know is polished and has a beautiful backdrop and has a beautiful stage. So it lends itself really nice to video content in general. And video for marketing and for content consumption is huge right now. 65% of internet traffic was video content in 2023. That number grew 24% in the last 2 years. And we're estimating that it's going to be about 82% of all internet traffic is going to be video by the end of 2026. So that's crazy when you think about how much time we spend on the internet and how people are consuming information. Over half of us currently today consume it as video. That's why it's so key to make sure that you are producing video content in some way. And then when you talk about that message retention, right? You're learning, you're trying to teach your audience something, or you're trying to get them engaged in your brand, your message, whatever it is that you're trying to communicate through your content. Viewers retain 95% of a message when they watch it in a video compared to just 10% when they're reading it. So when you're really trying to maximize, one, your time and effort, and then two, the time and effort of the people consuming your information, video really is a key way to make that easy.
And I think you raise a great point, Chris. And I think it's also, people have shorter attention spans these days, and short form video is all the rage. That's what does really well on social media across different platforms. So I just wanted to add that as another point in terms of thinking about video, but also the short form side of video as well. Can you get those 2 or 3 highlights in a short form video to transmit your message further?
Well, that's really interesting. There was some stat last year about Google search potentially going down because the way people were trying to find information was searching through Instagram or TikTok or Reels, right? And I think even I'm guilty of that. I'm trying to figure out, the best chocolate chip cookie recipe. And instead of going into Google and sorting through all the pages, right, I'm scrolling through, these short videos of people making cookies, and I'm seeing it and I'm learning it quickly. And that just now is how we are being kind of retrained to find information.
Yeah, I think also kind of to your point, I think video is something you can do and multitask with. I like that because, rather than like in your case, when you're, trying to find a good way to bake those cookies or whatever, you may not want to have to read it, read through a whole article to understand. It's like, hey, let me just watch a quick video on this. This can be a lot quicker to see how it's happening. And I can also do that while I'm working here, trying to get all my stuff set up to bake the cookies. So I think, for me, a lot of times I'll consume content. I'm like, I don't want to read this whole article on it. I'd much rather watch a video so I can be taking care of something else, making dinner, whatever else I might be doing, and catch up on and get that content, get the information I need.
100%. And it's so interesting. LinkedIn just did this study this year about the tendency for people to share information and share content on LinkedIn. People are 20 times more likely to share a video than any other piece of static content. So when you're thinking about how you want to consume and what's easy for you to kind of multitask or watch or see these little snippets, right? That's also then what the kind of information you want to share with other people. So when you're trying to maximize your content and get the biggest life out of it, one, you want to do it, but also two, you want other people to kind of evangelize and share your message. And video makes it way easier, and people are way more likely to do that.
100%. Yeah. So as we dive a little more deeply into video, let's talk about how we can repurpose video specifically, since we know how important it is. So to start with, let's kind of take it from the context of starting with the event, like we're talking about, and then repurposing that content and the different ways we might want to allow that content to really live on. And the first way here is look at this picture. We're going to use a hypothetical example. I've got a keynote presentation here from our CEO, Reggie, and he just completed that presentation. I'm still in the context of the event. So the first way of repurposing content is a little closer to home that we may not always think of, but it's a good thing to keep in mind. That is during the time while the event is actually still happening. So this keynote is completed. Now I could just call it good. That's it. Those that attended got the information. Or I can take advantage of the opportunity to repurpose that content like we talked about a little bit earlier and have that available right there on my scheduling system, in our case, our Attendee Hub or event app, and make it easy for those attendees that for whatever reason didn't get a chance to consume part or all the content, give them the opportunity to be able to see this great keynote. And so this is the first way to really think about, a very simple way, very close to your event, to start thinking about repurposing. In this case, it's so simple. All you really need to do to have it repurposed in this way, in terms of production work, is really just look at cutting off or cutting out any of those elements that are live only. So there may be, like at the end of the video, you might have the MC talking about going to lunch or something like that. You don't need that when you're looking at this video for on-demand content. So all you have to do is get into an editing tool, quickly trim those elements off, and go ahead and have that ready to go right there within your scheduling system. Makes it quick and it's easy. One tip as you think about this, a lot of those, when you're looking at on-demand catalogs that often are associated with these scheduling systems that allow you to showcase all your recorded content from your event, keep in mind that those use thumbnails to display. Usually they're visual because that's a lot nicer way to do it. And so they're going to capture a thumbnail of each of those different videos. Just keep that in mind, because sometimes automatic generate thumbnails, if not most of the time, aren't exactly what you're going to want. So investing a little bit of time to grab a good thumbnail can go a long way. Another quick tip is to recognize this is a great opportunity to take advantage of accessibility and extend reach through accessibility. I'll talk a little bit about that more here in a second. But now, once I start getting outside of the event context, which we usually think about as about 30 days, then I'm going to look at the length of this video and really start thinking about how many people are really going to watch this long of a video outside of that event context. As you can see here, this is a 45-minute video, give or take. And when I start thinking about putting this outside the event context and the immediate people that are event attendees, virtual or in person, I'm thinking they're probably not going to watch all of that. So now I need to figure out, okay, what do I want to do? So first case, let's say I want to use this in long form, and I want to be able to take advantage of the overall video, but I know people aren't going to watch the whole thing. So what am I going to do? Well, one opportunity we can take advantage of is the concept of chapters. Chapters, identified technically, is really just a timestamp with a label. What does that really mean? Well, what chapters really are then is the ability to take your entire video and break it up into bite-sized chunks that people that don't have the incentive or desire to, perhaps watch the entire video can find what they're most interested in and just watch that segment quickly and easily because it's identified right there for them in the video. This is a really great way of breaking up a long format video. YouTube supports it if you're putting this on YouTube, or being able to do so within the Content Hub, where you're also looking at maybe perhaps utilizing long form video and having it live. And a couple things to keep in mind about this is that it's really not that hard to do in terms of the actual editing process. All you have to do is go in, identify that spot, and go ahead and add a label to that point. Now, the one thing little tip you may want to keep in mind is that people may also take advantage of the fact that you've divided this up and provided multiple chapters to maybe watch more of it. So this is an opportunity to allow your attendees or viewers of this particular video to see more than just one segment they're interested in if they really like that piece they've seen. So it's a great way to get them to watch even more. Additionally, some people might just be looking for a quick summary. It's like, I just need to know what the key takeaways are. So as you look to create these chapters, if you happen to have within that content at the end a quick summary, maybe the speaker did it, maybe add it in, you can mark that, and it gives a way that people just want that quick summary can go in and watch that point. And at least they're then consuming that part of the content. If they want to go further, they can go ahead and access more. Now, if you're looking to not use the entire video, and as Chris and Victoria pointed out so nicely, and you need just a little bit, you're looking to do perhaps a social media campaign, or you're going to put something up on Instagram, as mentioned, you're not going to want to use that full form video. So instead of utilizing a technique like chapters, now we're going to start looking at what we call clips. And really, chapters and clips, I sometimes think about as two sides of the same coin. Really, a clip is like a chapter, a segment of the video that it can stand on its own. It can be utilized in whatever context you feel makes the most sense. Maybe it's a key moment in what Reggie said, that it's just like, it was a very insightful comment, or perhaps a minute or two at the most, that I want to reuse. I can go ahead and take that video, cut off the rest very easily, and then just have a whole separate video I can now use for social media or other short form content where I need to utilize it. So really, it's kind of one thing that's nice about this to make things easier is to think about this. You could perhaps use your chapter points as where you can make these cuts, if those make sense. You can actually then kind of get 2 for 1 by utilizing the same breakpoints and creating some nice clips you can reuse in different places. So really, you can see from these 3 different ways, as you go about reusing these content, you can really, with not a lot of work, in a simple editing tool, or just with an online tool. YouTube even offers things like that, as do we in our tools. You can quickly repurpose this content in a variety of different ways that suit your needs. Now, there's a couple important ways I don't want to neglect to talk about extending the reach of our content. And the first one is accessibility. So as I mentioned earlier, you have the opportunity with your content, now that it's been recorded, to make it accessible. And I think a lot of people are pretty familiar with accessibility. It's an important thing that people are focused on. But just to remind you, why should we do this? The first one is the right thing to do. And it's important to recognize that we're reaching out to audiences, allowing all audiences, regardless perhaps of disability, to be able to consume the content. But another part of accessibility that sometimes is missed is sometimes the accessibility features that we're adding actually allow us to reach audiences, not just that may be faced with a disability, but there's differences in the way they're consuming our content. For example, one of the key components of accessibility is the use of captions or subtitles. And those I think everybody's quite familiar with, basically, providing of words for audio content. Well, in addition to providing those that may not be able to hear the content due to physical disability, it also allows you to extend the reach of your content to those audiences that may not, for whatever reason, have the audio on for your video. This is particularly true of social media. I know there's studies out there that show the vast majority of those consuming video on social media do so with the sound off. And so by providing those captions and subtitles, you're able to reach out to those audiences in both cases and allow them to get more out of your content and properly consume it in the ways that you want. Another part of accessibility that I don't think people are often aware of, but it's one I want to make a point of, is I think it's getting more interest out there, is the use of audio descriptions. This basically is another audio track that allows those that are not able to see the content to have it described to them. So they can also be able to take advantage of and consume that content as well. One other thing I do want to point out with accessibility is there's an opportunity with AI to generate things like captions, subtitles much more easily. The audio, the content can be parsed and turned into captions. You'll still want to review it, but it's a quick, easy way to add those elements to your content. Now, another way to extend reach is through taking that content and translating the audio, or perhaps a caption subtitle, into additional languages. Now, by saying this, I quickly want to note that localization is a real thing, and you do want to be sensitive, of course, to cultural elements, all those other parts of your video. But with modern technology, you do have the advantage of extending reach without exceptional amounts of effort, because technology can allow you to utilize the audio, utilize the technology to create multiple audio tracks for your video. Or you can also take, whatever captions or subtitle files you've created and have those translated in additional languages. So if you're, a multinational company or part of a multinational organization, you need to do this. You're probably very good at already doing it. But if you're just putting your content out there on YouTube, those audiences are there. And you have an opportunity perhaps to expand into a different market or a different set of individuals interested in your content. And it can be done relatively easily. So you can see with all these different ways, video can extend its reach by this one piece of content we started with Reggie's keynote can now be extended out to all these different audiences and all these different channels by simply doing a little bit of production work. And it's a great way to take advantage of and repurpose your content. And now I think we're going to talk a little bit about measuring the performance of all those efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a lot of what you said, Wade, that feeds into thinking about, okay, I've been able to make, through video, make the content more accessible, but how do I know if it's working? How do I know if people are engaging with the content that we have repurposed and created? And it really comes down to thinking about first your goals and your objectives. What are you trying to achieve? And then thinking about where you're distributing that content, what the key metrics are to think about. So if your goal is to increase social media engagement, for example, then what you'll be measuring will be very specific. It'll be things like how many shares you got or what the reach was through the number of impressions. If it's video, as Wade was just talking about, then it's thinking about, how many views have I got on these videos? What's the watch time? It's really interesting to see, where the drop-off point is for sessions, because that can also give you an indication as to where the interest in the topic lies. So, and if it's something like YouTube, for example, it's also thinking about, is this video content contributing to our subscriber growth? Things like website organic traffic is another thing to think about when it comes to perhaps you repurpose the content as blog post or landing page. So thinking about how those have performed in terms of the metrics that are most important for that channel. So I think there's no one size fits all for this. It's really just thinking about the specific distribution channel that you are leveraging, understanding what those key metrics are for that particular channel, and making sure that it's aligning with your goals. And I will say, I think I mentioned this earlier, it's not about trying to hit everything. I think you would want to prioritize, a specific channel perhaps to start off with and really start building your muscles there. So it might be, you want to grow your community on LinkedIn, then really thinking about what are the content topics and types that would really work well on that channel, and building up from there as well.
Now I want to talk a little bit about the biggest challenges that we all face, right? So it's nice to have all of this stuff. We definitely want to repurpose. We know that there's a lot of good that can come from this, but why aren't we doing it today? When we ran the poll at the beginning, over half of us aren't making this happen consistently. So why is that kind of a hurdle? We're going to ask you guys right now, submit the poll. What is your biggest challenge that you see right now in your role, in your organization, with repurposing content?
And can I jump in there as we're waiting for responses? Because I think one of the things can be the lack of planning beforehand. And I've been in that situation where the event's over and now you're just trying to think about what can we do with that content. And it's kind of like trying to play catch up, and it makes it a lot harder. And the thing is that it might seem like it takes a lot of time to pre-plan, but it does save you time afterwards, because you do know what you're going to do, and it's sort of more of a question of executing. But wanted to just throw that in there as we were waiting for responses.
I think, it's interesting because, and this is kind of what I was expecting to see, to be honest. It's a lot of it is lack of time and resources, right? It's stuff that we know we want to do, but it's really hard to actually make happen, especially like you said, you're done with your event, you have a lot of post-event reporting and processes that you have to go through. And sometimes you're just so happy to have the content finished and done and live that it's hard to revisit it and contribute more time and effort towards it, right? And when I think about that graph that you showed in the beginning of the synergy between content and events teams, this is where I think some of those communications can help with that lack of time and resources, because your content teams right now are also under that same stress, right? Of we need to develop content, and we are strapped for resources. We are strapped for time. And sometimes when you can come around collaboratively and say, well, we have all this great content that you can use, it's a lift on their time, and you can leverage some of their resources then to kind of tag team this repurposing effort, because you're not starting from zero, right? Neither party is starting from zero. So I think that opening those lines of communication is huge for helping that kind of lack of time and resources issue.
Absolutely, and it's something that we do here at Cvent with our events as well. It's making sure that the content teams and the demand gen teams and product marketing and all of our different teams who are involved in producing sort of the programming are also read into how that can feed into content that we produce, after the event. And I think as well, I would like to sort of re-emphasize the need to prioritize. I think sometimes the lack of time and resources can be down to sort of feeling pressurized to do all the things, and there's only so much we can achieve. So it's really going back to that prioritization. What are those really important key themes and messages that we want to really be focusing on, and doubling down on that.
Yeah, and I was going to take a second just to note our number 2. It's a bit ways behind, but there are still, obviously, there's 17% out there that are still working through those technical challenges, right? And I think that it's hopefully easier than you think. And that is part of what I spend my days worried about up at night, working on ways to make that easier for folks to do it. And one thing to keep in mind is know that AI, this is a very helpful place for AI when we talk about video. And there's elements already coming into play, like AI can help you identify your chapters I talked about. But there's things like that are coming to the rescue, and systems are getting better. So, if you want to, now's a good time to take a stab at it, take a chance. And hopefully it will be a lot easier for you than you might think.
And I'm going to break the rules a little bit. I know we're going to do like full Q&A in a little bit, but on this topic, we have a question from Natalie. About, how would you recommend repurposing content from a live event if your budget doesn't allow for recording and streaming, right? So that's a whole nother kind of bag of issues right there. And that lack of time and resources to make sure that you capture that video content on site, I think, is huge. And what I would say, Natalie, is sometimes don't feel so stressed that you don't have this really highly produced bit of video footage. Right? You still have that content. You still have those talk tracks. You still have that great, slide deck. You have all of that stuff. And your audience now, there's a preference, or not a preference. It's more of like an acceptance of more genuine, more raw content, especially in these shorter form videos. So have somebody hop on their computer or jump on their cell phone and do, quick tips of what they heard, or have your speakers do it after. I spoke on this panel and here's what I said, and here are my tips from the session in case you missed it. And that can be a little bit more grassrootsy feeling and still go over really, really well with your audience if it's distributed in the right way.
I was going to say a similar thing, and I think that's a really great point in terms of, we all have phones, and most of our smartphones, have pretty good cameras. And so can we get that user-generated content at the event, getting one of your speakers to answer a few questions and then putting that on social media? Another thing I did want to say, because this happened recently, was we had a round table where it was more of a closed room affair. So we weren't going to film that. But I sat in the room as a content marketer, listening into all of the things that were discussed, some of the challenges and the pain points. And what I was able to do from the notes that I was taking was then put together a blog post talking about some of those key challenges on a high level, impacting that specific audience. And so that's something to think about. Can you get somebody in the room to take notes on some of those key points, and then use those notes to produce something after the fact?
Yeah, and I would just chime in. This is one of the technical challenges that I know we're thinking about, is can we take advantage of any of the things actually happening in the room? Can we take advantage of that audio board that might happen to be there if there's at least audio piped in? And with the increased sophistication of devices that people have in terms of quality of camera and stuff, and I don't want to downplay the importance of good production quality because that is key, but can we start taking advantage of the fact that we're all carrying around movie studios in our pockets? So we're thinking about some of this stuff to try to find ways to make it easier for people to at least provide reasonably produced content, even if it's just for a podcast, if you can't get the good video. So anyway, that's one of the things we're really thinking about, trying to enable this to be easier to do.
And maybe it's a case of, you just brought this to my mind, Wade, but maybe it's a case of, getting some of those speakers that were at the event to then do a podcast episode with you or do a webinar, like a deeper dive on the topic, or maybe getting them to give a different perspective on the topic. So you're still sort of producing content that's tied to the event, but it's not dependent on you having the video stuff there at the time on site.
Yep.
I love that. I want to call out one thing too. I mean, I think when you're talking about the production of content and the creation of content, a lot of times you're working with external speakers or subject matter experts, and then maximizing having those people involved and their participation, right? Because a lot of times we invite them to be a part of these discussions, or we want them at our events because they bring some sort of street cred, right? Or pull to the audience, and you want to figure out how to continually amplify their presence. So having them come back again and do a podcast, or cropping up those little things, or pulling a quote from them and creating even just like a static digital ad of, here's a quote from speaker A during this session. It was great, that you could then distribute, right? Isn't necessarily distributing the exact piece of content, but it's just taking a creative way to lean into maybe what the value of that content and information was.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome.
So before we dive into Q&A, even though, because I've kind of started that a little bit early, key takeaways overall from the presentation today, right, is repurposing your content fuels your distribution channels. So you have so many different places that you can put this content, and you have the great stuff to begin with. So there's just so much potential for that one piece to go in multiple different places. Include repurposing in your strategy from the start. Think about it in how you're creating your content, how you might be capturing your content, the potential that you have to capture new things on site, right? And continually measure and iterate, because the way that we are consuming content and information is changing. The tools that we have access to is changing, right? And then the teams looking for kind of information to repurpose are always changing. So don't be afraid to keep practicing and changing your strategy here and figuring out, how you can keep optimizing this process. Before we jump into Q&A as a whole, I would just like to do a little call out here. If you would like to earn a $100 Amazon gift card, please sign up for a complete demo with us. We're going to pop the link over there in the chat. To anybody outside the US, the gift card can be converted from $100 to any currency of your choosing. We can walk through some of our video repurposing tools, which I think would be really great. So definitely take advantage of this. I know I always want an Amazon gift card. And now we're going to kind of launch into live Q&A and see kind of what you guys think. We've got one here by Kristen. So similar to Natalie's question, right, on the video capturing. Are there ways to repurpose content from a keynote presentation if the keynote speaker doesn't allow for the session to be filmed?
That's a good question. And I can jump in there, because if we think back to the slide we showed about the different categories of sessions that we have at Cvent Connect Europe, one of those were keynotes. And a lot of the time we can't film those keynotes for contractual reasons. And so some of the ways that you can get around that is, if you're able to, is sort of include that in sort of a takeaways blog. So what we do post-event is do a wrap-up blog post where we talk about the key highlights from the event. And in that you can put, a section about that keynote and some of the themes, and maybe if you're allowed to, some of the key quotes from that. And that's a good way to sort of, and also, complete that with images and photos. Usually you can still use photos from the keynote session. And that's just a great way to still be able to get out the message from that keynote without getting around that problem of not being able to actually film it.
All right, next one. So our event audience is mostly over the age of 50. Do you know best practices to kind of reach this audience? We're just starting that post-event marketing strategy outside of emails. So we're exploring the possibility of blogs, but we don't really have much capacity to make that happen. I think I'm going to jump in here first, and then maybe we can chime in, right? I've seen a huge change over the last 4 years in general with audience consumption based on age of like different types of formats. I know the pandemic is kind of taboo to talk about all the time, but we've seen audiences of all ages now be more familiar with things like YouTube or even Instagram or TikTok, maybe on accident, right? But they are okay handling this type of content and this type of platforms, video content, digital content, way more than they were a couple of years ago. So audience age barrier is a little bit less difficult, I think, than it was previously. What do you think, Victoria?
I was just going to say, I think it goes back to the principle of knowing where your audience lives and really understanding that, where they live online. So it might not be a channel we assume. It could be something like Facebook, for example. And it's really about knowing where that audience lives online. And that's maybe something that you can sort of do more research on at your events, really doing some sort of survey to understand where they consume content, how they consume it. And that's really the best way to then determine how and where you create that content for this audience. So audience research, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you guys hit the nail right on the head. It's really about understanding that particular audience, and it can vary a little bit depending upon the vertical or the nature of your organization as well. So,
great point. Wade, I think I have one for you now. Can these repurposed clips be stored on the Cvent platform, or must we have a separate place to kind of store this content for future use? Where can we put it as event?
Yeah. Yes. So for the clips, they can be stored on the Cvent platform. I won't get too deep. There's a couple different ways you can do it. A great help to this is our video library. It's a great place to store those clips. And the library can allow you to reuse those clips across multiple events if you choose to, or a variety of different locations throughout the Cvent video ecosystem. But you can also store them externally and load them on in if you choose to. So really support both ways.
Awesome. And I know I just want to put it out there. I know we're coming up on the end of the hour here. So this is the end of the actual presentation. If you have to jump, thank you so much for attending. Reminder, the slides can be downloaded right there on the side and resources. We're going to stick around. We're going to take a few more live Q&A questions here and then maybe answer some in the chat. So please, if you've got extra time, hang out with us. But if you've got to jump, thank you so much for joining us today. Here's another one. How do you evaluate what content should be pay gated? And to what degree content can be repurposed for advertising? What do you think about that, Victoria?
It's an interesting one. I think that when it comes to gating or providing content that needs to be paid for, it's really thinking about the value for your audience. Is it truly something that is exclusive content that they can't find anywhere else? Is it unique insights from subject matter experts that is worth me filling out that form, giving you my details to then consume that content? Because that does have an impact on brand perception as well. If I fill out the form and the content is valuable, then that makes me want to continue to consume your content. So that's sort of my criteria for it, thinking about the value for your audience and the exclusivity of it. And then the content that you would sort of use to ungate and use for promotional purposes, I think would be more of that, some of those highlights, highlight reels from your event, maybe some quotes, clips from important speakers, where it's really about giving the audience a taste of what your event is all about and driving that FOMO and making sure that people feel like they want to come back or come for the first time if they've not been before, and thinking about how that can live on social and how you can sort of drive that interest through there.
And I think somewhat related to that is the idea of just informational gating. I know it's not a real term, but the idea that you may not want to pay gate it, but you may want to get information from those folks in order for them to be able to consume that content, versus other content like we discussed on YouTube, where you just go ahead and make that content available to everyone without any sort of gating involved. So I think that's another dimension of it to keep in mind.
All right, I think I'm going to take one one more because I know we're coming up on time. Is it possible to use the Cvent product or Cvent platform to allow attendees to come back and watch video content to earn CEUs or credits, right? Or must that be done through a live webinar or event?
Yeah, currently Events Plus does not support that. That is something that we're aware of and actively looking at. So right now, yeah, through a live webinar event would be your solution for that at this point.
All right, maybe I'll take one more because I'm a glutton for punishment. Let's see. Can you offer some suggestions on what type of technology we could use to record, edit, and leverage to easily create content that is accessible? Any resources that you use regularly or you think are easy to learn and use?
Yeah, so as far as making, I was able to read there for a second, but let me just read it really quick. Yeah, it's primarily around the accessibility part. So really the nature of how you record it and edit it, any technology should work there. And then the only key I'd make about, the only quick tip about editing is edit before you try to make it accessible. Otherwise, you're going to have problems because remove some of the stuff that you made accessible. So quickly do that. As far as the tools, okay, I'm a product manager for Cvent. I'm of course going to mention ours. We have built into our video tools the ability to actually generate captions and subtitles. We also support in all of our video players the ability to display those subtitles and captions, as well as the ability to actually support those audio descriptions that I showed you. As far as how to do that, you can do that right in our tools, but it's not just our tools. Other tools also allow you to be able to generate those subtitles and captions, as I mentioned, by use of AI. Additionally, just a quick little note, always remember to review them. And then another important resource is there are providers out there, third-party providers that can help you that are experts in this. We provide some of it to make it easy. Providers out there that you can actually go to that can help you to know, just search. You search web accessibility, you'll find some great ones out there. And they can actually walk you through all these different types and produce things like audio tracks in another language or audio descriptions, which are difficult to do in an automated way. So we haven't done them yet ourselves. So hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Wade. And thank you so much, everybody, for kind of hanging out with us today and being a part of our webinar. Like I said, we're going to wrap up now, but Victoria, Wade, and I will hang out for a little bit in the chat if you have any questions. Otherwise, feel free to connect with us or reach out to us after this. And thank you so much for attending.
Thanks, everyone.